the center of all love I stand, and from that center I, the soul, will outward move. From that center I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group and throughout the world. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group and
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. This is Michael with, I'm afraid, some kind of a morning voice here. Anyway, I'll be substituting to you for some days, at least occasionally so, as she's up in the Little Bear Meditation Center, north of the Arctic Circle. And I hope you do have a chance sometime, either in the deep of winter or at the height of summer, to come to such a place, because the sun presents some very interesting phenomena. Either it doesn't set or it's always set, which is interesting for those of us who live in more temperate zones. Well, today we're working on the attraction of financial resources for the work of the hierarchy, and well, that's just extremely important. We seem to put that symbolic measure that we call money into many different types of objectives. But on the planet at this time, in my view anyway, there's nothing more important than the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the great Lord Maitreya, the head of the hierarchy. This is what can make the difference, and I do believe will make the difference for humanity's entry into the Aquarian Age in the right way. We must not be naive and think that simply because we're entering the age of Aquarius in another, almost 100 years, 2117, that everything will necessarily go smoothly. Remember that Aquarius rules epidemics, and it rules atomic energy and weaponry and all kinds of things that humanity has to learn to master, overcome in some way. So we really do need the help of the Christ. Excuse me. We need the help of the Christ, and I think that's what he saw in the Garden of Gethsemane 2,000 years ago, when he decided to acquiesce to the will of Sanat Kumara and passed through the sixth initiation of ascension at that time. Well, let's see. I have some reading for us, and it's from the book The Problems of Humanity, and we've been reading in this book now and then. Let's see here. Just come to it. Yeah. He was talking about the general characteristics of capital and of labor, and how the improvement within the capitalistic system actually has led to the provision of many types of jobs for countless millions of people, regardless of the arrangements made between the leaders of capital to, in a way, hold the laboring class down. But this will not now occur. Apparently, this book was written about 70 years ago, and we've seen huge changes. Educational facilities, he says, also grew, and with this came the demand by the laboring classes for better living conditions, higher pay, and more leisure. As a matter of fact, Master DK promises that under the guidance of the fifth ray and its inventive nature, that a new period of great leisure will come to humanity, and the human being will be in a position to cultivate himself or herself in a way that consciousness will improve and sensitivity will improve. So this is something we can look forward to in the Aquarian age, and simply because the fifth ray can provide it. It can also provide, of course, the weaponry which can lead to mass destruction, and there are again tendencies in that direction, prompted by those who are competitively and egotistically inclined. You could say, well, I thought we've been there already. Well, we have, but apparently not sufficiently to completely seal that door where evil dwells. Anyway, the better living conditions are on their way. DK tells us that the employers have constantly fought. They organized themselves against the demands of the awakening mass of men and precipitated a condition which forced labor to take action. And this condition, involved labor unions, and today there are some more enlightened employers, we might say, of large enterprises, and they certainly do offer something quite different from the meager kind of pay and opportunity for free time than was offered during the 19th century. Certainly that was the worst, and then even as early as this book was written. Well, now we go on to our particular reading for today, page 76 in this book, and you should hopefully see it on your screen. Groups of enlightened men in Europe, Great Britain, and the United States began to agitate, to write books which were widely read, to start discussions, and to urge the moneyed classes to awaken to the situation and to the appalling living conditions under which the laboring class and peasantry lived. Of course, we involved here the freeing of the serfs in Russia, which came along in the 19th century, and then this tremendous revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, following the First World War, and many changes in the union life of the laboring groups. He pretty well divides that, between moon chain humanity and earth chain humanity. Of course, it's not absolutely so, but he seems to place the owners among the moon chain humanity and the laboring groups as earth chain humanity. So we're looking also here at the 19th century. The abolitionists fought slavery, whether of Negroes or of whites, of children or of adults. We have to look at slavery in a larger sense, don't we? And, it's coming back. I mean, maybe it never left entirely in a global sense. There are some forms of not only economic slavery, but a kind of slavery which enforces the laboring groups to remain hardly employed, but enforced into labor by owning people, and they're impressed into duty, you might say. Impressed in the sense that the American Navy, the seamen were impressed by the British Navy, producing the War of 1812. So people are held against their will. That's the long and short of it. And if it's not an economic holding, it could be even worse. A rapid developing free press began to keep the lower classes, so to speak, he puts that in quote, informed of what was going on. Parties were formed to end certain glaring abuses. The French Revolution, he's going back even further to that uprising against the extremely selfish class of people who were related to the French kings, and thus to one of the expressions of evil on our planet. There have been several, where the Black Lodge has really emerged, and the periods of the French kings, that was one such period. The French Revolution, the writings of Marx and of others, and the American Civil War, with the eventual Emancipation Proclamation by Lincoln. The American Civil War all played their part in forcing the issue of the common man. Men in every country determined to fight for freedom and their proper rights. So we can see this has been going on for some 200 years, really. Okay, now I just have to see if I can... Gradually, employees and laborers came together for mutual protection and their just rights. The labor union movement, by the way, it was supported at first by hierarchy, we are told, and from a third ray ashram. I think an English master was involved in that. The labor union movement came into being, eventually with its formidable weapons: education for freedom and the strike. Many discovered that in union there is strength. So this is kind of a harbinger of the Aquarian age into which we're entering. In union there is strength, and that together they could defy the employer and wrest from the moneyed interests decent wages, better living conditions, and that greater leisure, which is the right of every man. The fact of the steadily increasing power of labor and of its international strength is well known and a primary modern interest. So I think what I'd like to do, if I can do it, excuse the sound of microphones moving here, I would like to it's going to take a little more than I thought. Right, I want to somehow highlight certain thoughts. The whole idea of education and the strike. Now, there's been a movement lately to disempower the labor unions. Of course, it had been noticed also that a kind of selfishness crept into that movement. The masters were quick to notice it, and they had to withhold some of their stimulation as a result. So let's move on here. Powerful individuals among the union leaders came to the surface of the movement. And I'm remembering some of these from my childhood days. John L. Lewis and Walter Reuther, of course, that's very dated, but the whole idea that one should break the back of the unions is an idea of the selfish groups, who DK is referring to here as the moneyed classes. We certainly do have a Gemini situation, but of a lower type. So they came to the surface of the movement. Some of the employers who had the best interests of their workers at heart stood by them and aided them. So there were such people, and there are such people today. I mean, we cannot dichotomize and say, look, everyone in the moneyed classes is necessarily selfish. That's far, far from the case. I'm remembering that one of the great champions of the worker, let's say in the United States, was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was a progressive Aquarian with Virgo, the sign of the worker, on his ascendant. And he was so effective in helping the worker with the New Deal to emerge out of the Depression, which was really a worldwide depression, but we're talking about the United States, that he was called by many of the more selfish, he was called a traitor to his class. And this is what we're reading about right now. They were a relatively small minority, but they served to weaken the confidence and power of the majority. The fight of the workers is still going on. Gains are steadily being made. Shorter hours and better pay, and I might add, safer working conditions. Shorter hours and better pay are constantly being demanded, and when refused, the weapon of the strike is used. The use of the strike, so beneficent and helpful in the early days of the rise of labor to power, is now itself becoming a tyranny in the hands of the unscrupulous and self-seeking. So, DK and the other great ones, they're not unaware that it is a two-edged sword here. And there are, among the laboring group, the self-seeking and unscrupulous. Labor leaders are now so powerful that many of them have shifted into the position of dictators and are exploiting the mass of workers whom they earlier served. Labor is also becoming exceedingly rich, and untold millions have been accumulated by the great national organizations everywhere. And then, of course, this fascinating statement: the labor movement itself is now capitalistic. Okay. Well, I think that may be enough for us to read this morning, the complexities of how the financial situation in the world shall be resolved fairly, but also with attention to the principle of hierarchy. You see, that's the difficult part, because Aquarius, into which we are emerging now, is a sign which tends to level all participants and not consider the differences in skill and ability which reincarnation, and of course they don't believe in that, which reincarnation has provided. So the fact that there is a hierarchy of human beings with expressing a hierarchy of skills and so forth is not recognized, and instead, if that type of thought is put forward, then envy will arise. And you'll get the kind of statements like, oh, well, he's no better than I am. Well, okay. Essentially, as a monad, that's true. But it is not true in terms of the advantage to which we have put our many lives. So, with the discovery of immortality and reincarnation, there will come an adjustment in this field too. And instead of looking like elitism, such an individual as a philosopher king or queen, surrounded by his or her co-workers, will look much more acceptable. Oh, well, okay. There's a lot here, and we have to think about also the complexities of the financial situation. Generally, an attitude of discriminating generosity is best. I'm thinking about Bill and Melinda Gates here and all that they've given away, and not just to avoid taxes, but there they are among the most wealthy, and they promote health and education extensively, but selectively, the best they can. And there are others as well. Some of the younger people born into very wealthy families do have a different attitude, and we can hope that will lead to a real elevation and an adjustment in fairness between the peoples of the world. So I'm going to, if I can just indicate this, and we'll say this will be the 22nd. Resume. on 22nd September 19, and that doesn't look right. Okay. Oh my goodness, I'm having some peculiar letters appear here. Sorry. Yep, that looks a little better. And we will work accordingly. And I just tend to emphasize the first sentence where we're going to begin. We have to look at this whole issue of financial trusteeship in a broad context. We cannot make superficial judgments. It is true, I suspect, because of reincarnation and a differentiation in skills and experience, that as Christ said, the rich and the poor you will always have with you, but me for only a little time. Okay. I suspect that that's true, but we have to, as a race, as a human race, we have to understand why that is the case and what are the esoteric dynamics behind that fact that the rich and the poor you will always have with you. Okay. Now, coming back here, and we've seen some words of the Master Decay. And now let's align with the soul, a group being, really. And in our deeper understanding, give thought to some sentences that Master DK suggests. To those who give shall be given, so that they can give again. This is a law. And there's all kinds of ways to give, of course. In the economic field, sometimes people say time is money. Well, in a way, that is true. And people who give generously and liberally of their time, even though they may not have the money to give, they are certainly helping. And I think it can be said as well as a law, and one that the masters have fulfilled or taken, strong steps to fulfilling. To those who give all is given. That is continuous throughout the universe until one reaches again that point of retracted emanation where one realizes one is the wholeness of the universe. Now let's take into our meditation some questions that we want to answer under the influence of the soul as it affects the mind. If money is one of the most important things needed today for spiritual work, what is the factor which is at present deflecting it away from the work of the hierarchy? There is a philosophy of life we call materialism. It's a huge blight upon human perception and understanding. An enlightened use of matter is not materialism, and we'll see that during the Aquarian Age. The roots of materialism, a mistaken identity, and lack of understanding who we really are. What is my personal attitude towards money? Do I regard it as a great and possible spiritual asset, or do I think of it in material terms? What is my personal responsibility in regard to money which passes through my hands? Am I handling it as a disciple of the Masters should handle it? That's really a deep question to be resolved on the basis of our own discipleship and what we're trying to promote in the world. And of course, the element of sacrifice is always involved here, because, if you spend on one objective, you may not be able to spend on a lower and dear objective, even though it may not be as spiritual. So there are decisions to be made. And we make those decisions as if we were Hercules overcoming the various heads of the Hydra, the wrong use of various resources. Pretty well you can look at any one of the 9 major heads of the Hydra and relate it to a positive quality. But there is a negative use also possible, and we've seen that a huge glamour of money hangs over humanity. I mean, you can see that even in the question regarding money and the value of the individual, where people monetize their value. What's he worth? Well, I'm worth a lot more than that, you see. And you put it in financial terms. So instead of looking at the real virtues, we look only at the amount of money that one possesses and the ability to work your way towards the possession of still more. So we're all Hercules the soul, we're all the bright son of Hera. We all have the perspective, could we but remember it, of the higher planes, and we know that resources can and will and must help the divine plan. This is a big battle among the physical heads of the Hydra and Hercules. Is there anything that shows that we are battling? He himself has given to humanity so much. Millions of years ago he was an Atlantean teacher, and he created these stories, dramas, to best impress the humanity of the time, which was a very imaginative and pictorially inclined humanity, and astrally focused, how to rise. But look, we do have a battle on our hands, and it doesn't end quickly. So can we put this flowing golden substance of money that we've all agreed upon, I mean, if we didn't agree upon its value, it would have no value, can we put it to right use? Can it flow into the hands of those who really care about the elevation of the human race? Christ, his masters, his initiates, his disciplic workers, can it flow into their hands? Well, that's the hope, that it can flow towards the Christ, and that the great second aspect of divinity can merge with the third. Love and money are so often mentioned in the same breath. We're told when people deny their desire to do something, they say, I wouldn't do it for love or money, as if these two factors are the most important, but they have to be put together in an harmonious manner, in an enlightened attitude towards material, towards the things by which human beings live. And the incoming seventh ray initiates of the first degree will be in a position to help with that as we move into the Aquarian age. Interestingly, there's a kind of a very powerful seventh ray initiate surrounding the Christ, namely Benjamin Franklin, clearly on the seventh ray, and clearly a disciple of the Master R, the Count. So let us send up our prayer to the planetary logos. And because we are cooperating, submit our demand that money flow into the right hands. O Thou, in whom we live and move and have our being, the power that can make all things new, turn to spiritual purposes the money in the world. Touch the hearts of men everywhere so that they may give to the work of the hierarchy that which has hitherto been given to material satisfaction. The new group of world servers needs money in large quantities. I ask that the needed vast sums be made available. May this potent energy of thine be in the hands of the forces of light. I think that when the Christ is among us visibly, he will be able to persuade many, many human beings that the idea expressed in this prayer is the right idea. His work is extremely demanding, and it certainly involves bringing the material aspect in line with the aspect of love and wisdom, and in line with the will of the planetary logos expressed through the divine plan. So we review our use of money, and we try in our own individual lives to really send it in a direction where the most good will come. There is always a kind of a karmic draw upon money, but also a dharmic draw, where we learn how to spend it according to those projects which will really elevate human consciousness, human health, human vitality, the human being in general. And we have to realize that the Christ stands behind this, and that in this question of invoking money for hierarchical purposes, this prayer, this statement, this mantra, this assertion of fact is very important. Think about this. He for whom the whole world waits has said that whatsoever shall be asked in his name, and with faith in the response, will see it accomplished. That's an amazing statement. But it has to be a worthy ask, doesn't it? One cannot demand selfishly in the name of the Christ. We can't do that. So we certainly turn our meditative, prayerful self towards the things needed by humanity, and maybe the things needed by ourselves as we try to help humanity, if the motive is correct. Now think about what you'd like to support and why. There are so many worthy objectives that could lead to a happier, more fulfilled life for humanity. And we now sound out the ones in which we are particularly interested and in which we will be participating through the actual giving of money to support those projects. And so we say, I ask the needed money for, and we substitute the projects now. So, I ask the needed money for, and you fill that in, and can demand it because from the center, which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. We come to the feet of the Christ. This statue, you know, the statue over Rio de Janeiro. It must have uplifted and saved so many lives. It's a huge conception, reminding us of the great Lord and his benevolence towards humanity. And so we say, thinking of him and his active presence on the planet, doing things we can hardly conceive, because after all he is a becoming seventh degree initiate. We have simply to offer our cooperation. We have gathered in your name, Lord Maitreya. Be with us. And all of us who are aspirants and disciples, well, it's said that every true aspirant is known to him. But of course, a true aspirant is one who is beginning to enter the fifth kingdom of nature, the kingdom of souls, and to have a huge change in values. Obviously, it wasn't always thus for us, and we've been through thousands of incarnations and have had material values, but now the awakening begins. And this great initiator of the first and second degree, who is Neptune in a certain respect, notices those whom he can help within the whole of humanity which he is helping. Well, if we can serve and spread love in our surroundings, we will be acquiescing. We will be aligning our will, our little individual will, with the divine will. It's so important. The true spiritual life is led within, No one will know really what's going on except for those very close to the one who lives and, of course, the Master. But though it's lived within, it's expressed without. And thus, like Atlas and these hands that we see, the cooperators help the hierarchy uphold the world. So lay your plans. There are many worthy causes. One cannot support them all. One does not have the resources of a Bill and Melinda Gates or a Warren Buffett or a Jeff Bezos. Those are huge resources. But with what one has, so to speak, the widow's mite, one can support. In the temple, Christ noted the widow, and she just gave a little bit with modesty. Whereas the Pharisee was praising himself for all he was giving. And the Christ noted to his disciples that the widow's giving was the true giving, because she hath given all she hath. And that's an amazing step. So let us be generous with our time, with our thought, with our blessing, and of course with our financial resources, helping wherever we can, wherever that help is within our power. Well, friends, we have in the Ask program many activities and broadcasts and webinars, and we are grateful for your attendance and your subjective support. We are doing, there's not so many of us. We're not ranking ourselves in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but in terms of our will and our intention, there are just many people out there who want to do the good. The men and women of goodwill, and maybe then the more powerful servers, the new group of world servers, among whom perhaps we can rank ourselves. And we just keep thinking and giving and offering and seeing and imagining in positive ways the transformation of humanity. It will be transformed. And we have, it's going to be quite a century, this one, until the beginning of the Aquarian Age, 2117, the date given by the Tibetan of the alignment of the vernal equinox with the 30th degree of Aquarius. It does move backwards, It's kind of a precession. It moves backwards. But we'll be there in just about 100 years, with many trials and tests along the way. So, thank you, and we'll have, our usual, let's see, 2 years, as I say, she's up there in the Little Bear Center, The little bear has Polaris, a star of guidance, and a star that at this time stands for the monad. There'll be always the gyrating of the Earth's pole, and different pole stars will come in, but at the present time, this great star of orientation is in the tail of the little bear. The father aspect, the big bear, the son aspect, the little bear. So we'll see whether, hopefully she can, make all that work. If not, I think maybe we'll have one more of the sacred pentagram meditations. Not so much today, but more tomorrow. I think at 7 or 7:45, we'll try to let you know, GMT in the PM. And then Tuesday, no broadcasts. And then we'll resume on Wednesday with the triangles work. So, lots of love and many blessings from Tuya and myself and all of our co-workers. And we have to love each other, obviously, and do the best for each other in an intelligent and effective manner. So let's hope we can do that. I think we can. And we'll be seeing you soon. Bye-bye.